Hello, welcome to another Teach Back by Jacqueline Salazar. The topic of my Teach Back is The Brain Has a Body. That's the topic that I chose. So, with the article that was used in the class was The Brain Has a Body by Chio and Beer. And basically, they were just talking about how the body process inputs and outputs from the nervous system. The muscles acts as a low pass filter of motor neuron outputs, and it filters out the high frequency components of the neural outputs. They also mention how the body also processes outputs from the nervous system, along with the roles of the brain, body, and the environment that are fully appreciative. Basically, from what I've understood in this article, is that they were trying to explain or prove that they're saying that the body has that the brain also has a body by showing its inputs and outputs of how the nervous system works and how it connects to the rest of the body, from having certain kinds of emotions and feelings, and the way how the body moves. That's how your brain functions, with the way how your body moves. So in conclusion from this article, from what I've understood about it, was they're basically saying that the brain also has a certain type of the brain also has a certain type of movement, or it also has its certain basically, yeah, it has its certain type of movements, and that the way how they move, it's through the nervous system, along with other muscles that they're using, that the brain is using, that can control the body as well, along with the brain. Now I'm going to be talking about the next few articles that I've researched and learned more to why the brain is also the body, or why it works just like our bodies. So the first article that I've researched was a brief guide to embodied cognition. That's the title, to Why You Are Not Your Brain, and it was by Samuel McNerney. And basically the main topics were the body influences the mind, along with in the 17th century, they claim that there is a great difference between the mind and body. So from what I've read about it, they were explaining how they had this theory in the 17th century that Descartes was explaining how the mind and the body are separated from each other. So they assumed that the mind was separated from the body. But they were also trying to bring back the study of neuro thoughts and language all together with it. So from this article, in this article, from what I've got, René Descartes was in the 17th century. He was trying to claim that there is a great difference between the mind and the body, and he was trying to basically assume that the mind or the soul is basically entirely different from the body, which was he was basically saying that by the mind is entirely indivisible, and that the reason that it is disembodied, because the mind is disembodied, and the reason is transcendent and universal. But then they had this other there was these other two people named George Lakoff and Rafael Nunez, and they explained how the mind was and the body was in a whole philosophical worldview, and that they were trying to explain that our cognition isn't confined to our cortices, that it's basically influenced by our experiences in the physical world. And they explain this is why sometimes, or this is why sometimes we think over our heads, or we express ideals that we don't understand. So they were trying to basically prove that we see, that we have the physical inability to not see something over our heads, and the mental feeling of uncertainty, or they try to explain why we understand certain affections and feelings, especially as infants and children. they have like some sort of type of judgment of affection, and almost like they're always corresponding with the like sensation of worth, which is basically what they were trying to prove, as into like that our minds and bodies kind of have like a certain type of connection, because like our minds have a certain type of feelings, which then can connect to like our bodies, to like why we feel this way, or why like our heart beats like faster for like certain feelings and like whatnot. But this is what I've got from this article. But then overall, I did learn that they were saying that that they didn't actually believe like the mind was physically separated from the body, but they also didn't think that the body had like an influence in cognition. And since it was like the time during the 60s and 70s, that's when one of the scientists, Lakoff, realized that he was thinking about like the mind as like a computer, but then he wanted to like start studying like the embodiment of it, which then led to him saying that, oh yeah, like the mind and the body could be somewhat similar to each other, or like the brain also has like some sort of body influence on it. But yeah, that is what I got from that article, from what I've learned about that article. And then the next article was like how the brain works, which was in the John Hopkins medicine article. And basically from this article, what I got was that they were basically talking about how the brain controls your body and is connected to the nervous system, along with simply the brain controls how your body works with the emotions you feel and how you move around. So from this article, I'm going to explain a little bit more depth from these points that I got. And they were talking about like how like the brain can control like the ability to think, talk, feel, and like remember things, walk, and like even much more. Like even like they're saying like how like the brain couldn't even control your breathing along with it. And then that they were explaining how like the brain and the spinal cord, the nerves form the central nervous system, and how like it connects like how the brain connects with other body parts through the spinal cord to control like the personality, our senses, and like the way how our body functions, from like walking to breathing and etc. And like they were just talking about like the three main parts of the brain, how like all these parts like have like a big type of function for how the brain works, along with controlling the body. For example, like the outer part of the brain kind of controls like the readings, thinking, learning, along with like emotions and speech, along with like muscle movements like walking. So it does control like the way how our body moves, or basically with from what I've got about it, like yeah, like the brain has a body because it has like there's parts in the brain that have like certain type of senses or functions that like kind of complete our whole body and how it works. It also like controls like our vision, hearing, and like other senses. So like without the brain, like yeah, I don't think we would have like a body overall that would be able to function properly. So from what I've got, like they basically are saying like the brain is a big part of having like it's a kind of like a big part of the function of having it in your body, because it is like kind of like the main part, or the brain is like the brain has a bunch of movements or functions that complete like our whole body, to why we're moving, feeling, hearing, talking, and even seeing. And overall, like that's what I got from that article, to like basically like conclude it to why like the brain has a body. From that article was like they were just saying like, oh yeah, like it does also have like certain types of functions, and it also has like it how it has like big parts of like the way how it's controlling like our body and our emotions. And then now I'm just going to be talking about my last slide, which is kind of like a reflection from all of it, or from overall like what I've learned about like the articles, and like how like how the cognitive scientists are proving how the brain has a body. So I was this thinking about like overall this topic that I researched or learned more about. I think that like you can definitely relate this kind of topic or these like topics to the field of cognitive science, just because like yeah, like cognitive science is mostly about like the mind and the body and how it works. So you can definitely relate to like discussing about like the brain and like why the brain has like a big impact on the body, or why the brain is like basically a body, for instance, because of like its functions and like how it works. And then I've also like was discussing about like how this topic can make how can like it can expand like my knowledge, not only on like how the brain works, but also like how the body works along with the brain, and like how it can be used in many ways. Like I do think like the brain and the body, you can be able to use it in like so many ways. The brain has like millions of like things that it can do that like our body like can handle, or like that we probably also like don't notice it, but like we like don't know like, oh, like yeah, like our body can do this, and we haven't noticed it like this whole time, because like sometimes our brains like make us think a little differently, or sometimes our brains do make us like overthink it or like think to the top, and then we have the ability to be able to do these kinds of things, you know. And then like my last point, okay, and for my third article, which is the topic of the article is called about the brain, which is from a Princeton Brain and the Sports Medicine website. And basically the main points that I got from them was that they have mentioned the brain, that it is the most important organ in the human body, which it is very true. The brain is like a very important organ in your body, because like it kind of just controls like our emotions along with like our reactions and our actions. Our brain basically is kind of like it kind of is like a type of mind or system that makes our body react differently depending on like our emotions or the way how we're feeling, along with like our actions, like what we do next. Like it kind of just like makes us act differently, or just act in a way where like depending like how we're feeling and whatnot, like it'll decide like what actions like we can be able to do. And then also like from that article, it says that the brain can be responsible for the movement, body temperature, touch, vision, along with judgment, reasoning, emotions, and learning, and pretty much everything else in our bodies, or everything else that we do. Like yeah, the brain is basically, it is responsible for most of the things we do. For like when we wake up, our brain kind of just activates automatically for the times we wake up or the times we don't, we go to sleep. Our brain can shut down like sometimes with certain like with certain movements, or sometimes our brain could shut down depending on whether or not we're feeling like sick along with feeling healthy. So our brain is basically like a body, because you kind of have to take care of it in a way. The brain is kind of like, it's like your, it is like your body, like I mentioned it, like it is something you need to like always kind of be consistent of. And the brain is very consistent all the time, and it's always like working. So the brain is a very important organ in like our body, and the brain basically does have a body. It also has control, like these, like I've mentioned, like, or like the article mentions that it has control, like movements, like what kind of movements we do, like when we're like working out. Like our brain has the ability to let us do certain kinds of movements, or movements that we never thought we would be able to do. Like for example, I guess like I'll just put it like for myself, like I thought my body can never handle lifting weights or becoming like an Olympic weightlifter. But I feel like the brain kind of gives you the ability to think that you can be able to do anything. And I feel like that's actually like a really cool thing to think about, or to even like say that your brain has the ability. It's like you know how like when you're working out and there's like some workouts that are very difficult, like your some coaches will be like, oh, it's not like your body, or it's kind of like how your brain thinks and whatnot. But yeah, it's basically like how your brain thinks, like, oh yeah, like it's like all in your head, like you just gotta like tell your brain or your head to like say that you can be able to do it and whatnot. And luckily, like I just had like that kind of like motivation or just mindset that my body can be able to lift like very heavy weights, and my body can be able to do that, which is really cool. Which I think the brain is like a very important part of our body. It is basically our temple, and it does help us, like it does also help us consider that we can be able to do things that we never thought we can do. Or the brain also makes us feel like certain emotions that that us humans never thought that we could be able to have these kinds of emotions, like feeling like loved or sadness, or just or very happy at some point, or very angry as well, depending on like the situations, along with like the way how our brain works. But yeah, like overall, like I was just saying that like the brain also has the ability to give us like vision and eyesight. The brain helps us like see certain things, along with being able to like feel, touch, and like sense. Like when we know, like our brain can kind of like also send signals to our body, or sense like things when we know like something's happening, or when we're feeling like this kind of way. Like our brain gives us that ability to have those kind of emotions and whatnot. And I think that's really cool about the brain. And I feel like it is very important in the cognitive science field, because that is kind of what cognitive science is all about, is that like it is learning about the mind, the brain, like how it works, like why it works like this way, or along with like why we feel these kind of emotions, why our mind and our bodies have like these kind of reactions and actions, and along with all that. For my reflection was that I do think that this kind of topic can definitely fit into like the neuroscience, along with like the artificial intelligence areas, just because like you can figure out like how the neuroscience, because you're obviously like looking into like the brain and how like it's functioning with the body, or how like the brain also has like its completely own set of like functions, and like how you can say like, yeah, it is, the brain has a body in the way. But then you could also like explain like how like the brain and the body work together functionally, and like how like its nervous systems like have its outputs and its inputs of like the processes. So yes, you could like definitely include this topic into neuroscience. And then with like artificial intelligence, you could definitely include the brain and the body, and like you can make some sort of like artificial intelligence type of like robots, or some sort of like objects or gadgets that we can like create, so that way we can help like some sort of people whose like brains or bodies are function well. So you can be able to like to use like artificial intelligence into this kind of topic. And to conclude my presentation, these are my sources for the websites that I look into, and I hope you liked learning more about the brain and how the brain actually has a body and how it works. Thank you for watching this presentation.